Welcome to Factual America, where we dig beneath the headlines, cut through the noise, and uncover the facts shaping our country today. In this episode, we're taking a hard look at something that's become unavoidable in our daily lives: the so-called misinformation industry. The word pops up everywhere, but have you ever stopped to think? Who's actually behind the machinery labeling, fact-checking, and policing what counts as misinformation? Who benefits, and what's really at stake? Today, we're lifting the veil on an industry that's rapidly changing the way Americans get their news and share ideas. Let's start with a simple question. When was the last time you read, watched, or listened to a news report, only to be told what you just heard might be misinformation? The term itself has exploded, popping up in newscasts, on your social media feed, even as labels warning or covering up dangerous viewpoints. But here's the catch. Who gets to decide what counts as misinformation in the first place? To understand the origins of today's misinformation industry, we need to rewind a few years. Remember the 2016 presidential election? Claims of foreign interference and social media manipulation hit the public consciousness like a thunderclap. Suddenly, tech giants and mainstream media were falling over themselves to promise better fact-checking, tighter rules, and vigilant oversight, all in the name of protecting democracy. Sounds reasonable, right? But anytime you see a rush to control information, you've got to ask, who's writing the rules and for whose benefit? The formation of the misinformation industry didn't happen in a vacuum. Powerful players from the worlds of politics, academia, big tech, and legacy media quickly realized that fighting misinformation could be extremely lucrative, not just in dollars, but in influence. It became a new way to regulate ideas, manage public perceptions, and sometimes even silence dissent. In effect, a cottage industry became a multi-billion-dollar global enterprise almost overnight. Enter the fact-checkers. Those groups and individuals now granted the authority to label news, memes, and even basic opinions as true or false. Companies like Facebook, Twitter, now X, YouTube, and TikTok signed lucrative deals with dozens of organizations such as PolitiFact, Snopes, and even international outfits like the Poynter Institute. We're often told these fact-checkers are neutral and independent, but peel back the curtain and you'll find links to political activism, billionaire funding, and even government agencies both at home and abroad. When you let billionaires and big corporations decide what's real and what's not, you have to wonder, is this really about the truth or about controlling the narrative? Take, for example, billionaire donors like George Soros and organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, known for funding various truthiness initiatives globally. It's not a conspiracy theory. This funding is a matter of public record. Ask yourself, why are so many ideologically motivated groups so eager to set themselves up as the final authority on what you're allowed to read or share? Consider how big tech companies use these groups to outsource their censorship. They don't want the PR nightmare of banning users directly, so they build trusted fact-checker networks to do the dirty work. The result? An unaccountable pseudo-government is created, operating without respect for free speech, but heavily influencing what Americans see, believe, and talk about. Now, here's where it gets even trickier. Many fact-checking organizations receive government funding, directly or indirectly. European nations openly bankroll groups dedicated to labeling American speech, and US agencies, sometimes through academic grants, do the same. Lately, we're learning about proposals for disinformation boards in the Department of Homeland Security, and moves at the state level to monitor what you say online, all justified by the fear of fake news. If this sounds like surveillance to you, you're not alone. Think back to 2020, COVID, the elections, and the sudden rise of new truth guardians. Remember how discussing certain topics, lab leak theories, vaccine risks, Hunter Biden's laptop, got you flagged, banned, or labeled as peddling fake news? Months later, many of these stories turned out to be grounded in fact, or at least worthy of debate. Yet the gatekeepers never apologized or issued retractions. The damage to public trust was done. That brings up another fundamental issue. The misinformation industry isn't just about facts. It's about controlling what topics are up for debate. Ideas get squashed before anyone can examine them critically. And if you dare to question the narrative, you're branded a conspiracy theorist, troublemaker, or worse. Once a topic is stigmatized, serious journalists and ordinary Americans both get the message. Stay away. And that's not just paranoia. A 2022 report from the Columbia Journalism Review found that large swathes of the media were self-censoring on sensitive topics, terrified of being targeted by misinformation watchdogs. This chilling effect means fewer voices, less debate, and a public left to blindly trust official sources instead of using their own judgment. Let's pivot for a moment. Why do so many Americans still fall for fake news, clickbait, or outright hoaxes, even after billions have been spent on combating misinformation? The answer is simple, but damning. People no longer trust the mainstream media or the so-called experts. Draconian moderation, fact-checking, and censorship do nothing to restore that trust. They erode it further. When Americans see dissenting voices silenced, they start to wonder, what are they hiding from us? And here's another twist. The same organizations warning about misinformation have often published, amplified, or been complicit in spreading falsehoods themselves. Think of the Russia collusion narrative, hands up, don't shoot, or endless predictions about the climate apocalypse that never seem to come true. When these are proven wrong, or at least questionable, how often do you see apologies or corrections? The answer is almost never. In fact, the very nature of misinformation changes with the political winds. Why? Because a lot of what gets labeled as misinformation today is simply last year's mainstream talking point that's fallen out of favor. The standard isn't truth. It's power and narrative control. Whatever threatens that control, no matter how well supported by facts, gets buried. There's a psychological factor too. When experts are elevated to near religious status, regular Americans are treated as naive children incapable of independent thought. But here's the reality. Americans are some of the world's most critical and innovative thinkers, when given the chance. The more you try to protect them from dangerous ideas, the more likely they'll seek those ideas out and judge them for themselves. Speaking of experts, have you noticed many fact-checkers have backgrounds in political activism, partisan journalism, or even straight-up lobbying? Few have advanced degrees in science, history, or data analysis. Instead, lots hold degrees in communications or political science. These aren't unbiased referees, they're players in the game. Let's drill down to the economics. Why does the misinformation industry exist in the first place? Follow the money, and you'll find an unholy alliance of big tech, government agencies, and nonprofits, raking in ad revenue and massive grants. The business model is simple. The more misinformation there is, the more you need to pay these groups to police it. That's a recipe for inventing crises where none may exist, or at the least exaggerating the problem for profit. But let's not pretend every claim about misinformation is bogus. There really are foreign actors, online trolls, and bad faith operatives trying to mislead Americans about elections, national security, and more. But here's the key difference. Most Americans can spot outright propaganda from a mile away, if given all the facts. The trouble comes when institutions that claim to protect us from misinformation start hiding their own motives, or worse, lying by omission. Looking at the numbers, the misinformation industry employs thousands of people, generates vast fortunes for insiders, and controls the flow of news not just in America, but worldwide. These organizations now act as digital gatekeepers, privy to powers our founders could never have imagined. And yet most of their operations are shrouded in secrecy, and almost nobody can hold them accountable. So what should we demand as Americans? First, transparency. Every fact-checking or misinformation policing group that touches American speech should reveal their funding sources, affiliations, and who's making the decisions. There should be a clear appeals process when someone gets censored, shamed, or shadow banned. No more black box justice systems. Second, we need to restore faith in open debate, not just expert monologue. No single group should have the last word on what's true in a country built on freedom of thought. Civil discourse is messy, but it's also the secret ingredient of a healthy democracy. The answer to bad ideas is better ideas, not censorship. Third, the public needs to be educated, not indoctrinated. Critical thinking isn't the enemy, it's our first defense. School kids and adults alike need to be taught how to spot logical fallacies, weigh evidence, and question sources, not just memorize approved opinions from the latest official narrative. And, finally, Americans should be empowered to speak, share, and yes, sometimes make mistakes, without the threat of losing their voice. A culture of free inquiry requires courage, not obedience. We can't let a handful of unelected, unaccountable organizations decide where the lines are drawn. So, where does all this leave us? The misinformation industry is bigger, richer, and more powerful than ever before. But its very existence proves something else. The spirit of free debate in America is not dead. It's just under attack. Our founders believed in the marketplace of ideas, a place where truth wins out, not by decree, but through vigorous discussion. The only way to preserve that tradition is to demand the truth, about the truth police themselves. Now, it's your turn. Do you trust the so-called misinformation watchdogs? Have you ever had your posts flagged, fact-checked, or censored online? Why do you think these organizations are so determined to control the narrative? Drop your thoughts, stories, and questions in the comments below. And if you want to see more investigations like this, let us know what topics you'd like us to tackle next. Here on Factual America, where the facts still matter.